I want to ask you a favor. It's really simple, but I need you to do this for it to work. Grab your phone, open Google Maps, or just close your eyes and visualize that map of Europe that we all have burned into our brains since school. Look towards the north. Look at that huge mass of cold, gray, turbulent water isolating the British Isles from the rest of the continent. The North Sea. We take for granted that this sea is an absolute truth, right? That it's an eternal border. We assume that Great Britain has always been a lonely and proud island, separated from its neighbors by a wall of salt water. We think that to go from London to Amsterdam, or from Edinburgh to Copenhagen, the only option is to hop on a plane or fight the waves on a boat. We see oil rigs, cargo ships fighting against the storms, and we think, the world has always been like this. Well, that's all a lie. Or, rather, it's an extremely recent truth. That map is just a temporary snapshot of a blink in the history of our planet. If I had a time machine right now and took you back, not to the age of the dinosaurs, but to yesterday in geological terms, just a few thousand years ago, that map you have in your mind would stop making sense. If I dropped you in the middle of the current North Sea, you wouldn't drown. You wouldn't need a life jacket. The only thing you'd need is a good pair of hiking boots, because where today you see 5-meter waves and abyssal darkness, before there was land. Thousands and thousands of square kilometers of firm, green, and vibrant land. Picture the scene. You're standing on the banks of the River Thames in what is now central London. You adjust your backpack, look east towards where the sun rises, and start walking. You leave the current coast behind. You keep walking on what is today the bottom of the sea, and you don't stop. You walk for days, crossing forests of oaks so old they block out the sun, crossing infinite meadows full of wildflowers that reach your waist, wading through colossal rivers winding through an immense valley. And at the end of your hike, without getting your feet wet in salt water even once, you look up and you are in Berlin. It was a natural highway of grass and life connecting the whole continent. Welcome to Doggerland. I know what you're thinking. Doggerland. The name sounds like a cheap amusement park, but I assure you it was as real as the ground you are stepping on right now. Forget Plato's Atlantis, that city of philosophers in white tunics and magical technology that sank by divine punishment. That is a myth. Doggerland is the historical reality. It is the real Atlantis that Europe lost and that almost no one talks about. And don't imagine a frozen wasteland. Don't think of a deserted and sad tundra on the way to the Ice Age. Quite the opposite. During the Mesolithic, that Middle Stone Age period just before farming, this place was the authentic Garden of Eden of Europe. It was, without exaggeration, the best place to live in the entire Northern Hemisphere. While the rest of Europe tried to shake off the cold of the glaciers, Doggerland was a lowlands paradise. Imagine a spectacular ecosystem, a mix between the Okavango Delta in Africa and the Doñana marshes, but on a continental scale. An infinite network of lagoons, estuaries, and riparian forests. The most fertile and rich land was there, just where today there are only fish. Close your eyes and see it. A golden sunset light bathing a plain that seems to have no end. Herds of giant deer, the megaloceros with 3-meter-wide antlers grazing peacefully. Aurochs, those wild ancestors of the bull that were like tanks of flesh and bone moving through the mist. And lions, yes, cave lions stalking amongst the reeds. It was a noisy, wild world where life burst from every corner. But the most important part of this landscape isn't the animals, it's us. Because Doggerland wasn't empty. It was inhabited by thousands of people, our ancestors. And here I need you to break another mental cliché. They weren't brutish cavemen who only knew how to grunt. They were modern Homo sapiens, people identical to us. They had our brains, our hands, our capacity to love, laugh, and dream. They were hunter-gatherers who lived incredibly well. Imagine a typical camp about 9,000 years ago. The smoke from the bonfires rises straight up to a sky full of stars, competing with no artificial light. There's the smell of roasted salmon and toasted hazelnuts. Around the fire, grandmothers are weaving fishing nets with perfect technique. Men repairing bone harpoons, children playing chase among the trees. For them, this fertile valley was the center of the universe. It was their home. They knew every tree, every bend in the river. They had sacred places where they buried their dead with red ochre. They looked at the horizon and felt the same thing we feel: safety. This land is ours, they thought. It has always been here and always will be. They had no idea they were living in a doomed world. They didn't know they were living on a geological time bomb. For them, that forest was eternal. And that's what makes this story give you chills. It looks too much like us. We also believe our map is definitive, that our coastlines are fixed lines. They thought the same, and they were tragically wrong. The tragedy of Doggerland didn't happen overnight. At first, it was a silent killer, slow, almost imperceptible. We have to position ourselves at the end of the last great ice age. The world was warming up. Far away, way north, the huge glaciers covering Scandinavia and America were melting. Billions of liters of fresh water returned to the oceans every day. The sea level began to rise. But it wasn't like a Hollywood movie where a giant wave swallows New York in 2 seconds. No, it was water torture. It was a slow agony of 1,000 cuts. The sea rose a few centimeters every year, maybe a meter in a generation. It might not seem like much, but on terrain as flat as Doggerland, a meter of vertical rise means the sea advances kilometers inland horizontally. Imagine the anxiety of those generations. The grandfather tells the grandson with sadness, "When I was your age, the forest reached over there, where now there is only wet sand and crabs." The hunting territory was shrinking. The freshwater marshes turned brackish and the trees died, remaining like white skeletons rising from the water. Camps had to move, retreat, abandon the ancestors' cemeteries. It was climate change in real time, lived in the first person. The pressure increased. Tribes found themselves pushed against each other in the remaining space. Less land meant more conflict, fewer resources, more fear. Paradise was becoming a trap. Great Britain began to separate, to become an island, cutting off escape routes. The world was getting small, and the water always won. And even so, they adapted. Because that's what we humans do. We are survival machines. They learned to fish in the new bays, built better boats. They lived on the shore of that invading sea thinking the worst was over. They normalized the disaster. They thought they had time. How wrong they were. They didn't know nature was saving one last blow. A brutal, violent, and definitive blow that wouldn't even give them time to grab their spears. It all started far from there, on the coast of what is now Norway. Beneath the calm surface of the sea, on the continental slope, thousands of years of sediment had accumulated, unstable. It was like a mountain of wet mud waiting for a push. And about 8,150 years ago, that push arrived. It is known as the Storegga slide, one of the largest landslides in known history. A section of the seabed the size of Scotland breaks off at once and falls into the ocean abyss. The impact displaced so much water that it generated an apocalyptic tsunami. A wall of dark, cold, dirty water that started crossing the North Atlantic at the speed of a commercial airliner. In Doggerland, it was a normal day. Perhaps it was autumn with low fog. People would be minding their own business, gathering shellfish, repairing huts, living. The sea was calm, maybe too calm. Suddenly, they noticed something strange. The coastal water began to recede unnaturally, way beyond low tide. The seabed was left exposed, glistening in the sun, with thousands of fish flapping desperately in the sand. A heavy, electric silence fell over the marshes. Some curious people ran towards the beach, fascinated by the phenomenon. Others, the elders, felt an instinctive terror in their guts, a primitive alarm signal screaming at them to run. But on a plain without mountains, there is nowhere to run. On the horizon, the line appeared. A white line of foam that grew and grew, blocking out the sky. The roar must have been deafening, like the end of the world. The Garden of Eden had its minutes numbered. The wave that hit the Doggerland coast wasn't clean blue surfer water. It was a black, dense, and furious mass. Imagine a 5- or 7-story building, but made of mud, sand, uprooted trees, and rocks, advancing towards you. The impact was devastating. The flat geography of Doggerland, which had been its greatest blessing, became its death sentence. There were no high hills to take refuge on. The tsunami didn't break on the beach and stop. It went kilometers and kilometers inland, sweeping everything in its path like a giant hand clearing a table full of crumbs. The camps disappeared in a second. The bonfires were extinguished with a hiss no one heard under the roar. The ancient forests, those oaks that had seen millennia pass, snapped like toothpicks. The force of the water was such that it stripped the topsoil, erasing paths, footprints, and traces of life. And when the tsunami water finally receded, the sea didn't go back to its place. That is the true tragedy. The ground had been so crushed, the vegetation so destroyed by salt, and the soil so eroded that Doggerland never recovered. The sea level rise, that slow agony we spoke of before, took advantage of the blow to finish the job. The lowlands remained submerged forever. What remained of the great continental bridge fragmented into dying islands, which, over the centuries, also ended up sinking beneath the gray waves. Great Britain was definitively isolated. Europe was cut, and the Garden of Eden went out. Silence fell over the North Sea, a silence that lasted 8,000 years. History forgot them. It's terrible to think about, isn't it? An entire civilization, thousands of lives, loves, wars, and dreams wiped off the map without leaving even a footnote. The Egyptians left us pyramids, the Romans, colosseums. The people of Doggerland left us nothing. Their houses were wood and furs, their tools, bone and fiber, everything biodegradable. The sea rotted it, dissolved it, and buried it under meters of sand and darkness. For us, their descendants, the sea was always there. We looked at the horizon and only saw water. Doggerland became a non-place, not even a myth, simply void. But the bottom of the sea is a curious place. It is the best freezer in the world. It is a dark, cold, oxygen-free archive, perfect for keeping secrets. And although we forgot Doggerland, Doggerland didn't disappear. It was still down there, waiting. Let's jump in time. Let's travel to the future. We are in the late 19th or early 20th century. The Industrial Revolution is roaring. The North Sea is no longer a silent place. Now it is full of steamships spewing black smoke. Look at one of those ships. It's a Dutch or English trawler. It's brutal work. These ships cast huge nets with lead weights to the seabed and drag them for kilometers, scraping the bed to catch sole and cod. Imagine the scene on deck. It's night, pouring rain and bitterly cold. The exhausted sailors operate the winch to haul up the net. The mesh emerges from the black water, dripping and heavy. They open the catch and thousands of silver fish fall onto the slippery deck, flapping. But, amidst the shine of the scales, a dry thud sounds. Cluck. A heavy sound of something hard and solid. A sailor bends down, pushes the fish aside with gloved hands and pulls it out. It weighs a lot. It is dark brown, almost black, polished by sand and time. It looks like a petrified tree branch. But when he wipes it a bit with his sleeve and looks at it under the oil lamplight, he sees it isn't wood, it's bone. But it's not a whale bone. It is curved, immense. It is a tusk, a mammoth tusk. The sailors look at each other, puzzled. What the hell is this doing down here? They ask themselves. An elephant at the bottom of the sea. At first, they consider it trash. Devil's stuff, say the most superstitious. Many of these bones ended up thrown back into the sea because they broke the nets. Others, the more curious, took them home. They used them to prop open doors in port taverns or put them on the mantelpiece as rare trophies. Look, son, a dragon bone Dad pulled from the bottom. For decades, this was a sailor's anecdote, a tavern curiosity. The North Sea was known as a graveyard of strange beasts. But then other things started coming out, things that could no longer be explained by drowned animals. Imagine the shock of a ship captain in 1931, the Kalinda, when emptying the net amongst the mud, a long, sharp object falls out. He picks it up, he cleans it, and his blood runs cold. It is not a natural bone. It has been carved. It has teeth, like a saw, sculpted with millimeter precision on a piece of deer antler. It is a harpoon, a weapon. Someone made this. Someone human. That harpoon, which today is famous and known as the Lehman and Ower point, was the smoking gun. It was the irrefutable proof. Archaeologists, who until then had ignored the fishermen's stories, had to look. And what they saw blew their minds. Suddenly, museums in Holland and the UK began filling up with fishermen's trash. Flint hand axes, stone hammers, remains of human skulls, jaws. The seabed wasn't a desert. It was a gigantic archaeological site. It was like assembling an impossible puzzle blindfolded. Every time a ship brought something up, we placed a piece. Here a mammoth. Here a hunter. Here a forest. We started to understand that down there was a ghost world. But we still had a serious problem. We couldn't see it. The sea is opaque. We knew something was there, but we didn't know what the landscape was like. Where were the rivers? Where did people live? It was like trying to map Paris by feeling around in the dark with a stick. Until help arrived from the most unlikely ally of all. The supreme irony of this story. Who has the technology and money to see what lies beneath the seabed? Oil companies. Yes, the industry searching for the fossil fuels that are heating up the planet today was the one that allowed us to see the world that global warming destroyed yesterday. To look for gas and oil pockets, these companies use seismic vessels. They send powerful sound waves to the bottom and measure how they bounce back. It's like a giant ultrasound of the Earth's crust. For years, that data was industrial secret, top secret. But recently, a group of scientists from the University of Bradford and other institutions gained access to those files. They fed terabytes of sonar data into their computers, digitally removed the water, removed the modern sand, and suddenly, there was light. The map appeared on the screens. It was a Jurassic Park moment. Scientists could see, for the first time in 8,000 years, the real face of Doggerland. They saw the ancient riverbeds, perfectly preserved like scars on the ground. They were able to trace the path of a giant river, the Schotten River, which was as big as the Rhine. They saw submerged hills. They saw deep valleys. They saw a large central lake, the outer Dowsing Lake, which must have been a spectacular place for fishing and hunting. They could point to specific spots on the 3D map and say, "Here, right here, on this bank of this ghost river, there had to be a settlement." They sent research vessels to those exact spots to take soil samples, extracting cylinders of earth from the bottom. And do you know what they found? They didn't find sea sand, they found peat. they found compressed black forest soil. And inside that earth, they found oak pollen, hazelnut pollen, fungal spores, and even animal DNA. They were able to reconstruct the landscape with forensic precision. Here was a dense forest. Here was an open marsh. Here were people burning wood to keep warm. The lost world ceased to be a theory and became a physical, tangible, mapped place. A place you could almost touch. Today we know that Doggerland is not a legend. It is the missing piece of the European puzzle. The next time you are on a beach looking north or flying in a plane over that gray sea, don't just look at the surface. Think about what lies beneath. Beneath those ships, just a few tens of meters deep, there are fossilized human footprints. There are tools that someone dropped the day they had to run because the water was up to their ankles. There are remains of bonfires where stories were told that no one remembers anymore. Doggerland is a mirror. It is a dark mirror in which we should look at ourselves very carefully. Because the story of those people, our ancestors, is not an ancient science fiction story. It is the story of what happens when the climate changes faster than we can react. They lost their paradise under the water. They believed their world was eternal, that their coastlines were fixed, that there would always be time to move a little further back. We believe exactly the same thing. We look at our maps and think they are definitive. But geology has a very dark sense of humor and a lot of patience. Doggerland teaches us that no ground is firm forever. That the map of Europe is a rough draft written in pencil, and the sea has the eraser. So, remember, Atlantis exists. It has no golden temples, no aliens, no magic. It has bones, mud, and lessons that have taken us 8,000 years to learn. It is out there, beneath the cold waves, sleeping, waiting for us not to make the same mistake.